This is Sarah Leslie with Go All In, helping entrepreneurs live the life they want to live right now, making the money they want to make the way they want to make it, while also living a rich and full life outside of their business. True personal freedom. Let's go.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad that you are too. All right. So, I have recently joined a networking group of sorts, and I say that like very loosely because it's really not at all traditional networking. And I joined it because, yes, I'm wanting to connect with other people. Yes, I'm wanting to get together with people to talk about business. And at the same time, more importantly, I'm wanting to connect with other like-minded people and other people who have a desire to have a deeper connection than the quick 2-3 minutes conversation, or even the network vibe where it's like you're spending a handful of minutes pitching yourselves to each other. Versus this group, you actually do no pitching, right? It's the opposite, where it's no pitching. You maybe have one line about what you do for a living. And then the rest of it is a genuine space and opportunity to actually authentically connect, where you're having genuine conversation around genuine, interesting, more along the lines of self-discovery conversation to actually be able to get to know someone. And naturally, as you develop relationships over time, you get to know someone and all kinds of different magic happens from those relationships. Create clients, you create friendships, you create connections, collaborations, referrals, all of the things. And you develop a deeper sense of connection to these people. It's just lovely. If you're interested, I'll drop the name and the link to be able to go to the website on this group called CollaborX in the show notes. Recently, I attended one of the meetings and the facilitator gave a lot of instruction around like preparation around what video we were going to watch that day. This particular facilitator likes to show a TED Talk. And then we have conversation that stems from there. So something that's meaningful, something that's applicable to us as business folks, and also allows for that deeper connection and conversation and to get a little bit of introspection. So I showed this video, and the general gist of the video was about this young person's experience of growing up with a really significant health issue and the impacts that had on her as a child, of course, getting a lot of bullying and other we'll just call it a negative experience, right? A lot of negativity around her and especially from the other kids. And what that was like for her and what it taught her and what she chose to learn from it and how she decided to live her life. She's quite young, in her early 20s. And it really spurred a bunch of things inside of me because I started to notice part of her learning and her place of empowerment was coming from a decision to prove the haters, and I'll just use that word loosely, but like the haters, wrong. To prove to the haters that she could accomplish whatever she wanted to, that she could, we'll say, just rise above them and live her life and be her own person and survive and also thrive in spite of her personal physical limitations and struggles, in spite of the challenges that she got from the external world. And so while it had this very like heartwarming and inspirational tone and certainly very admirable story of survival and thriving and accomplishment, I also just really noticed something that I hadn't quite seen before around at what point do we shift, or at what point are we creating a mindset that moves towards achievement and finding our identity and our sense of self-worth from achievement versus finding our identity within ourselves and finding our sense of self-worth and our sense of fulfillment from within us and allowing that true self to be expressed in the world. And I saw it as she was giving this talk. And it was a really beautiful moment for me to have the awareness, oh, this is how it starts. Literally, as if you've been following me for any length of time, it starts in childhood, always. That's where the stories start, the programs, the misaligned beliefs. And also this bigger, much like massive concept of when you get to 40, the traditional stigma at 40 is you're going to have a nervous breakdown. And that's not maybe as prevalent. It's not as prevalent, at least in my world these days. So I'm not really sure what they still call it. But that being said, the bigger scope here is to be able to understand what is it that causes that, right? Whether it's a nervous breakdown or it's an identity crisis or it's a moment in time at 40 or somewhere in there where you're like, I don't like my life. Something like that happens for a lot of people in their late 30s, 40s, and even into their 50s. And so as I have this sociology mind that's constantly studying people and trying to understand why things work the way they do, I have wondered and considered and contemplated, how is it that people get on these paths where they're ending up in their 40s, halfway through life, we'll say, or roughly there for average, where they're just not feeling content, where they don't feel content. And some people feel radically discontent, again, which was my story and is the story for many people, including so many extremely successful, high achieving, high accomplishing people. And we hear about it in the news regularly. I mean, it's just a regular part, right? Like you can just think now as you're hearing this, who's the last person that you remember hearing in the news, celebrity-like, who chose to take their own life? I recently just found out someone that I used to work with is no longer alive. There was no mention of how they died. And oftentimes when people don't mention how people die, it's oftentimes because of the person in some form or fashion taking their own life. Again, I have no idea what the situation was. And that's been a regular part of my experience of hearing about people who I actually even know or who've been in my world over the last, 25 years, who have chosen to take their own life or who have overdosed or done some sort of behaviors that has led to their own death. And so dialing in here, I want to really look at one of the things that she was raising in this talk that she gave is that she was raised to be normal. And so what posed for me is this podcast episode and a lot of writing around the topic, which is being raised normal versus being raised unique. Because part of her story, as she was telling it, I started to notice these underpinnings and these deeper threads, which she, of course, did not speak to, but that she was being raised to be normal in spite of having a condition that actually literally made her not normal. And if we're just going to use normal, just to clarify, because what a vague word that is, being like most other people around you, right? So not normal to like people that live on the other side of the planet, but like normal being that you're in the same general being similar to the people that are in your world. And this particular person had a radically noticeable difference that caused her to need lots of medical treatment and various other things, missing a lot of school and different experiences that the other kids in her classroom were not having. And so it really started to open up for me an understanding that when parents are intending their motivation, right? Whether they're conscious of it or not. The feeling behind parenting is, I want my kids to fit in. I want my kids to have friends. I want my kids to feel well adjusted to the world around them. That is a desire for your kids to be raised normal, for them to have a normal life experience, for them to be able to accomplish the things that they want to, but as long as it fits within the normal scope of things. Like, very few people on the planet are raised, right, to be exposed to, I don't know, the first thing that just came to my mind is join the circus, right? Who do you know that was raised with the opportunities or the thought, the mindset that they could join the circus? I don't know anyone. Why? Because that falls outside of the normal that I was raised in, right? So the normal that I was raised in is like, you grow up and you be a teacher, especially as a woman, you grow up, you be a teacher, you be a nurse. Maybe you could consider other things like being a lawyer. I'm 47. So just date wise, right? The kids that were around me were anticipating being the traditional mainstream things like doctors, lawyers, dentists, teachers, social workers, nurses, and the like. And again, those were very gender specific when I was growing up. Just thinking about that context of being raised to be normal, right? And so again, it's very broad because if we're really narrowing it down to two categories, it's going to have a lot of broadness to both of them. The thing that's more important to notice here is when you're raised to be normal, your range of what's possible for you is going to be limited. Versus if you are raised to be unique, the range of possibilities is literally limitless. So I'm curious what's coming up in your mind as you're hearing me talk about this. And can you quickly identify, were you raised to be normal or were you raised to be unique? Now, again, the bigger picture here is the motivation that goes into it. And so if the parent is desiring for the child to be unique, but it's not a motivation that's authentically about the child, then you're going to grow a whole different set of problems. What I'm really referring to here, dialing in, is unique in that the parent is helping the child to discover who they are, right? And then to be able to live into the truth of who they are, uniquely them. So I believe that the difference here, like between, from the way that I'm describing it, raised to be normal, like the people in your world, or raised to be unique, where you're truly living out who you believe you are and discovering more of that as you grow. Define whether or not we get to that 40 and we feel a lack, we feel an emptiness, because the achievements that we have sought after on the normal path have not led us to the fulfillment we ultimately desire. Everyone ultimately desires. And so when we're raised on this normal path, I think it is the path that leads us to the achievements and seeking our identity outside of ourselves, right? Because again, you're limited by the things that you're exposed to and by the things that your primary caregivers identify as being or right for you to experience and for you to become. And so if you have this desire to be something that doesn't fit into your parents' world or your primary caregiver's world growing up, then you're going to be redirected to come to a different path. Right? So just to use an extreme example so that it gets really clear, if your desire is to be a trapeze artist and you grow up with parents who are raising you to be normal and there are no trapeze artists within view in your world growing up, then you're going to be redirected back to a main line within your world, a normal profession. You're going to be redirected to being a teacher, for instance, or being a lawyer, for instance. And so ultimately, when you get to 40, you what? Feel deeply unfulfilled. Why? Because you're not living in your purpose. You're not living in what feels authentically true for you. You're not living from within you. You're actually living from without you, right? You're living from the external coming into you. So it feels like a huge contradiction, like a grave misalignment, like confusion. And we see this in so many different realms, right? The first one that pops into my mind is gender, and just the different experiences that people have with reconciling their own gender. For some people, right? Some people, that is a real conflict for them. And it follows along in this same path, right? To be raised unique or to be raised normal. And so if a person happens to be more flamboyant or more expressive and emotional, that's born a boy, right? And it doesn't fit in that parent's paradigm to have a emotionally expressive, dressed, savvy, I'm just mentioning all of the normal stereotypes, right? Then they're going to be redirected to being more normal. The other example that came up for me as I was in this conversation in the preceding hour or so after listening to the talk is a story that I heard about a friend of mine who was talking to someone else who was African American, had black skin. And this friend of mine said to them some kind of comment, I appreciate you for who you are. So I don't even notice the color of your skin. I just like the person that you are, right? They were having a conversation around race. And the black woman responded to my friend, this person that I know, and said, you miss who I am if you don't see the color of my skin. Which I just thought was so profound and I appreciated and has stuck with me for many years. That happened quite some time ago, because it's getting to this heart of this issue that I'm addressing here, right, is being able to be seen in all of who you are and being able to be seen in your uniqueness. And that is what creates a sense of alignment internally. So again, if you're raised to fit in with the predominant culture or the predominant skin color culture, then there's most likely going to be a misalignment because you're trying to fit in with a culture that doesn't really feel like it is yours. Trying to fit into someone else's world. Right? Which again comes back to some of these cliches around trying to fit in, trying to seek the approval of others, wanting to feel like you're just like everyone else, wanting to feel like you're normal. And so we have all of those different phrases because at some point in everyone's life, we feel like we don't belong, like we don't quite fit. Based on who we're spending our time with or what environments we're in, everyone has that experience. And part of why you have that experience is because you were raised to be normal versus raised to be unique and love the uniqueness. Because when you learn to love your uniqueness, you learn to love yourself. You learn to fall deeply and deeply in love with who God made you to be. Instead of learning or trying to fall in love with the imposter version of you, which is the normal version of you, right? Because when you're raised to be normal, you're ignoring some of the key components that actually create you. And so when we ignore or avoid or actually dislike parts of who we are, then we actually don't like who we are. to the fullest extent that is available. And I would just leave it at, for a lot of people, it feels like you don't like who you are. And I totally got there in my 30s where I was like, at a couple of real significant moments in my 30s where I had this distinct feeling and awareness of, I don't like who I've become. How is that possible? And I would be able to articulate, like, I like a lot of who I am. I like how I'm hardworking. I like how I care about people. I like how I want to do good in the world. I like how I'm able to accomplish this and accomplish that. But then also, I don't like how I don't always advocate for myself. I don't like how I make adjustments for certain people and in certain situations, etc. When we're looking at what's the impact now? And I thought of a couple of things of the impact now, right? The general one, obviously, and most importantly, is wherever you are in your life, do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel in alignment? Do you feel deeply connected to who you are uniquely? Do you feel deeply in love with who you are? Can you look in the mirror and be like, I am crazy about you. I love who you are. Because if you can't, there's nothing wrong. It's just a simple awareness that there is more life for you to experience. There is more goodness for you to feel in your being. And I want you to know that's available for you. So that being said, a couple of the other things that came up for me is naturally, if you have kids or you desire to have kids, is you're going to parent unless you have an intervention. The expectation is of being human and the way that humans are is that you will most likely parent a lot like your parents parented you. Again, unless you're doing the inner work and you're having those interventions to actually interrupt your childhood patterns that are still within you, even in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s and on, you are most likely going to parent your parent very similarly. Now, there will be, for sure, differences. And I'm talking like at a really fundamental level, you will parent very similar to how your parents parented. And you'll have a lot of the similar underlying fears and hesitations and worries that go into parenting. So what will end up happening, even though you'll have the very best of intentions and desire for this not to happen, is you will teach your children to also be normal. And again, you'll do better, most likely, right? You'll do better than your parents did because that's just the nature of life. We're constantly advancing. And so as every generation watches how they were parented and reflects on how they were parented, they naturally are going to make some adjustments. They're going to have an intervention just within themselves to say, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to treat my kid this way. I'm never going to tell them that thing. The thing is, you will still have the behavior ingrained in you. And so you most likely will take action along those very same lines. You'll just do it in your own unique way. It's just this crazy paradox that happens, right? You may or may not be experiencing that at this time, and I have experienced it, and it is really fascinating to hear my mother's voice come out of my mouth. Even when I had so much intention to never let that happen, it just happens, right? Because we're humans, and humans live their lives based on patterns and programs, right? And you could just hear another way of saying that is belief sets. We just literally continue them unless there's a radical interruption. And when I say that, it can be for the better or for the worse when you have a radical interruption. And the work that I would be referring to is the work that I help people with, which is doing the deeper inner work to have great intention about how you actually want to be living your life so that you're no longer living your life on autopilot or being unconscious in your life. You're actually shifting to radical self-awareness, which means you're now making really conscious and intentional decisions. And for the most part, that work needs to be done with someone who really understands how the mind works and won't let your stories go unnoticed. Definitely, it's going to show up in raising kids. And I know that if you're here listening to me, you want your kids to grow up unique. You want them to be so dialed in and in love with who they are that they are able, confident, have the self-esteem and the self-confidence to literally not be interested in what other people think they should or shouldn't do, not be looking to other people to know what they should and shouldn't be doing and who they should and shouldn't be being. You want them to be so full of themselves, so full of who they are and the beauty that God has created them to be, that they just go out there and do it, right? They just go out there and be the fullness of who they are. I know that's what you want for them. And the way that happens is by you learning how to live intentionally, how to stop living from the unconscious patterns that govern you right now and actually shift to being your own unique boss, your own unique being, your own unique, amazing human. And then the impact you'll then have on your kids will be transformational and allow them and give them the permission to be their own unique selves. The other thing that I was thinking about, like, how does this impact us, right? Unique versus normal, is it shows up in all of your relationships for you in present life, right? It's going to show up in your relationships with your business, in the relationships with your clients or your employees or your employer if you're still working for someone else. So it's going to show up in all of the relationships that you have within business, as well as in your personal life, all the friendship that you have, the ways that you engage with even just your service providers in your own life, and the various places that you go where people provide you services. And so when I think of the main two places that people care about this the most, it's in how they create their money and it's in the significant relationships in their personal life. And so when you're being normal, quote unquote, as I've discussed it here, you're not going to allow yourself to connect with the most ideal business partners, most ideal clients, most ideal prospects, most ideal collaborators, whatever your business happens to, whatever format your business happens to look like. You're not going to come into contact with those people who are most aligned with the true mission of who you are, the true vision of who you are. It just can't happen. And the same within the personal relationship space, right? You won't attract the very best quality of people who you could be in relationship with. And that will make a difference with who your partner is. It will make a difference with who your best friends are. It will make a difference with the tribe that you spend time in and the communities that you spend time in. So when we're looking to have the most meaningful, fulfilling, feeling alive and excited about being alive, we want to actually allow for our uniqueness to shine forth. Hence my pink hair and my super fun clothes, right? So that you can draw in and or find your most aligned people. The people who are going to be the best fit for you. That's how this happens. And so wherever you're at in your journey, right? If you're an adult, essentially, there's most likely work to be done to allow the unique you to fully live. For the internal you to be the primary person directing your life journey. Because otherwise, if you haven't done that internal work or you don't do that internal work to allow for that most unique you to come forth, then you're living a lesser life experience and you risk settling in the various relationships for something that's less than what your heart truly desires and what will allow your heart to feel the most alive, the most energized, the most excited, right? And a lot of people tell you it isn't possible to feel really energized and excited and enthusiastic about your life over a lifetime. And I am out to prove them wrong. Like, I'm going on since 2019, literally living the very best life that I have yet to live. Like so we're in 2025. So 5-6 years, let's go 6 years of the best years of my life out of all 47 of them. Except for a couple of years in childhood, but that's not even true. So the reason that I feel now, and again, at 38, I did not want to live anymore. I was the most miserable I've ever been in my entire life. And that's after a divorce, after other just very traumatic relationship breakups and challenges and feeling like I don't belong. The absolute worst that I felt was at 38, where I really, truly was like, this is not satisfying. I don't want to do this anymore. I just don't want to be alive anymore. To the version of me that I am now, where I never think about dying. Dying doesn't even enter into my thoughts, at least my conscious thoughts. Whereas before, I used to think about it all the time. It was like just a normal part of my thought life. And I now feel like I know who I am, like I am connected to myself. And when I'm alone, I don't feel lonely. Versus 10 years ago, when I was alone, I would turn the TV on or I'd pull up a radio station or what have you, or call someone on the phone because I didn't like to be alone. I 100% believe the reason people feel lonely is because they don't allow themselves to be with themselves, the real them. They don't know who they really are. They don't feel connected to the truth of their being. And so again, your experience is going to be unique, of course, to you. It isn't going to be my experience. You're not going to want pain care. Maybe some of you will. But that's unique to me. Not all of you will want the experiences that the other people around you are wanting or desiring. That's why we're unique. So don't make it be about any of the things you've heard me say, right? This morning I was sharing with a group that I wanted to jump out of an airplane for years and years. That's unique to me, not unique for you. Again, really diving in and doing this kind of work allows you to bring in the very best clients, the very best mate, the very best friends, the very best communities for you to allow yourself to receive and feel so deeply aligned, supported, excited about living that you just no longer go into those old spaces anymore because you're like, whoa, I like who I am so much more than I ever have before. And again, it will also eradicate loneliness. All right, you guys, what a great topic. I'd love to hear from you. Can you see how this is relevant to you today? Can you see how you fall into normal patterns or old patterns that you learned from childhood in this raising to be normal? And also, what does it look like for you now around allowing yourself to be more unique? What are those areas that you just, your own inner being, what shifts would you notice in your life? What would be different than what you have right now? And also, right, again, to any of you that want to be parents or are already parents, literally the very best thing you can do for your kids is become your own unique unicorn. Be the unique unicorn that you are so that you can impact them to also do that for themselves. All right, guys, thanks so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Cheers.
Ready to hire your own personal one-to-one mentor to help you take your life and your business to the next level? Go to my website where you can sign up for a no charge, no pressure consultation where we can get to know each other better. I get to hear your vision. I'll help you understand exactly what's getting in your way. And if it feels like a good fit and I believe I can help you, we'll talk about what it looks like to work together.